Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is game 11 from the 2021 FIDE World Chess Championship match between Ian Nepomniachtchi, playing on the white end, and Magnus Carlsen. Going into game 11, Carlsen leads 6.5, 3.5 in this race to 7.5. Let's have a look. It's another e4, e5 game. No Ruy Lopez though in this one. Italian game, bishop c4. Two knights variation. d3, both king bishops, out and about, and some prep work for both central and queenside expansion. d6, castles, a5. This cuts out the queenside expansion and produces a new square for the bishop on a7. After rook e1, the bishop immediately makes use of that square. Why is this? Why is the bishop retreating in the first case? And why to that square of all squares? Well, it's retreating to duck the d4 move with tempo. We don't want to see that hit so hard. And why a7 rather than b6? Well, on b6 it's more accessible. In what way? Well, here's one way. This line can surface. The knight would do well, not only hitting the bishop, but also, it stays in this key area of the board. That's nice. Additionally, if the bishop is on b6 and one day the bishop arrives on e3, white's generating a threat to damage black's queenside structure. Black would like to have a different pick of moves. And so it's bishop a7, allowing the rook to help defend the bishop. From here, knight a3, h6, important moment, h6. If you stare at a computer line at this stage, it'll say you can castle, but if you castle now, you have to deal with the pin, and this pin is not easily addressed. h6, right? g5, that's committal. White has a choice, maybe back off or try something like a sacrifice. What's the verdict here? Murky. Not clear at all. So, probably not a good choice to allow those complications. And so, bishop g5 is cut out altogether with h6. From here, knight c2. Also on the note of these kingside pawn moves, white will want to be careful about making this standard move h3 at this moment. At a moment when black is still uncastled. If h3 is played instead of knight c2, now black can consider g5. And this can easily be very scary. This already is pretty scary for white. Peeling open the g file, rook g8, black still retains the option to castle queenside. If, let's say, knight c2, let me put on some moves. This is dangerous for white. Also, just a little bit ago, I drew some attention to a sacrifice on g5. Would black be concerned about this sacrifice? No, because the rook gets to make use of g8 immediately. In that other variation, the king was on g8. And this pin is not really a great bother. For example, h4, to try and secure the bishop, well, there goes the bishop. And now there's a big, big problem on f2. And it seems like white is soon going to get mated. Anyhow, careful about h3 when black is uncastled. Knight c2. Castles only now. Bishop e3. And have a look at the clock times Carlsen spends on this next move. Well, he spends about 14 minutes on this next move. I can assure you, if the bishop was on b6, not as much time would be spent on this move. He has a choice. Instead of bishop takes bishop, he can consider a4, some space on the queenside, or simple centralization looking to negate this strong, this very active bad bishop. Okay, in the end, he decides on bishop takes bishop. And now rook to e8. White does not allow black to grab any space on the queen side. Playing a4 himself. Light square bishop exchange. b7 is now targeted. It's unprotected. That's the most convenient way to defend it. Simple. This does leave the knight unprotected, but there isn't a great way to take advantage of that. There is some fancy computer line. There's indirect ways you can defend b7. Well, you could allow it to be captured, some knight e7, queen takes pawn, rook b8, some d5 move thrown in there. It's unnecessary though. b6 is simple and solid. After rook a to d1, white is well positioned. Rooks are in the center, they're ready to go. The knights stand well. I like the queen. Clearly with this last move, what is white looking to play? d4. You don't play rook a to d1 and hope the d file doesn't open. d4 is being prepped, one way or the other. Knight e7. We've seen this time and time again in this match. In the Ruy Lopez, this time now in the Italian game. This queen knight on c6. It seems like it's developed, but not so much, with the pawn on c3 negating its forward movements. Doesn't have any other forward movements. So it looks to reposition. This is often a nice post, g6. From here, h3, only now. It's not the same now. White is not going to experience any problems on their king's side. Queen d7. And where will the break occur? Both sides are gearing up for central play. Knight g4, knight takes, pawn recaptures. This is not a deficiency for white, the doubled pawns. This knight is a convenient defender of g4. The pawn also supports maybe a knight f5 move, and white is in a position to recapture, if it is captured on f5, recapture towards the center. White can step up like this. This is healthy, a healthy structure for white. Now we have some action in the center with d5. d5 in this game is met with d4, so things are really heating up in the center. Multiple captures are available for black in this position. I do want to note that if white goes ahead and chops away on d5, we really do not get anywhere. We would end up in a rook-specific ending, and there's not much to play for. No great targets for either side. So, d5 on board. Either capture is available. Carlsen goes for e takes d4, and the reply is now e takes d5. Now, in this position, if white captures on d4 with the rook, black captures on e4 with the rook. And this doesn't go anywhere. Black is only very temporarily up a pawn and will soon win it back after queen c4. But again, a pretty dry position. Not much to play for here. The white knight is better than the black knight, but yeah, it's not going to be enough. So it's e takes d5. And now the reply is rook to e4. This is considered a best move. If black captures on d5, there's going to be a problem. White will win. This is a very serious pin, and there's not a way to get out of it. It's hit 3 times. It's only defended twice. c6 is met with c4, taking advantage of the pin. And if you try and defend the knight and break the pin, now you're subjecting yourself to a fancy knight move, knight f5. Yeah, this is a big problem. How do you deal with this? So if rook e6, there's now rook e to d1. Once again, hit 3 times, defended twice. Same story after c6. Here's one fancy variation. If rook here, you can capture like this, and then land a fork. Okay, it's all bad news for Team Black if you capture on d5 with the knight on this move 21. It's rook e4 in this game. Preparing to meet rook takes d4 with rook takes d4. Right, if we have a look at this, this really is not going anywhere. Knight takes d5, knight takes d5, queen takes d5. Now, if this pawn was still in its home square, this would be winning for white because of the move rook e8, forcing rook takes rook. But black has the option to play king h7, and things are fine. So an important tactic right there, possibility for a deflection, but it's not there because of that flight square. Okay, in this game, it's queen c2, rook f4, and a little bit of a think here, right? It's about 78 minutes remaining for Nepomniachtchi. He spends about 10 minutes on this move 23, g3, and that's a big blunder. This knight can be captured, and it is. Instead of g3, considered best is to go forward with this variation. It is dry, but you're not getting killed. Right, this position right here, queen takes c7, queen takes d4, major piece specific, all base points covered, excellent queen post. Both sides are fine, equal position. Something was missed here. G3 was tried. Really can't explain it other than say it was a blunder in the computer's eyes. A really big dip in the evaluation. Black is now winning after pawn takes knight. Can afford to give up this exchange because now the queen is sweeping in with check. King f1, queen h3, king g1. And it's bad news for white, however you look at it. The follow-up here was a little bit surprising to me by black. In this position, he went with knight f5. But black could capture on f2 here. There aren't many choices. You have two legal moves. King takes f2 would be met with the skewer. There goes the queen. And queen takes f2 could now be met with rook d6. And I don't know what white is going to do about rook g6. f5 does not help. The knight picks it up. The queen's defending. Once more, this rook is getting here, and I wouldn't be surprised to see, after queen take, if black had played pawn captures pawn and queen takes, and then went here, that may very well have been the final move of this game. But it doesn't end like that. This game continues. After knight f5, white has this annoying move, d6. And this makes Carlsen maybe he has to come up with something else. This rook isn't able to easily assist in this attack. These two pieces are around and they're dangerous enough, that's for sure. But the rook isn't going to be involved. Knight h4 is the follow-up. Multiple mate in one threats, queen g2 or knight f3. Knight is really well coordinated with the queen on h4. Not many ways to defend here. If queen to e4, knight f3, you have to give up the knight like this. You're threatening this. So what's played is f takes e3, stopping this mate. Knight f3 can be met with king to f2. Actually, let me point this out. Knight f3, this is a good line to show. Knight f3, king f2. If you play in this position queen h2, it's not clear. Surprisingly enough, this is not a win. This is a way one could go wrong. After king takes knight, queen takes queen, this is a drawn position after pawn takes pawn. This is dangerous. What are you doing about this guy? Rook takes rook, and we get a queen first. With check, king h7, and only then recapture. And even though black is up a pawn, perpetual check ideas, or I'm sorry, I miscounted. Black isn't even up a pawn in this position. This is a drawn endgame, queen-specific endgame. So this knight f3 with the skewer idea is not the greatest. Black is still winning after rook takes d6, but to follow up with the skewer, as tempting as it may be, this is a very dangerous pawn. So what's tried here? It's first queen g3. After king f1, now the knight goes into f3. So if white tries pawn takes pawn, it's a checkmate in 2. The threat here is queen g1 and queen g2, and that's a pretty neat mate. So we have to stop this queen g1 idea. What does white play? Queen f2. Here's another way white can go wrong in this position. Or excuse me, black. If black captures the queen, white's winning. After king takes queen, knight takes rook, we don't recapture the knight. Pawn takes pawn, white wins. Rook takes rook, we get the queen with check. If rook somewhere on the back rank, we slip in, we're soon going to promote. Knight is way too far away from helping. So, what does black come up with here? He plays queen h3 check. 2 options now, queen g2, king e2. Let's have a look at first king e2. After king e2, now we could take the rook. And if white tries this move I've put on a couple times now, capturing on c7, black can play queen g4 check. And next take the rook. If king takes knight, this is made on the spot with either capture on d1. And if king here, we take with the rook, and we got that covered. And we're ready to make a knight move and say discovered check. So king e2 is no good. Queen g2. Now black can capture the queen because this knight is now able to take on e1 in this case with check. In that earlier position, the king was on f2. So a nice little finesse, an important finesse. Where exactly to have that queen exchange? Well, let's invite the king on a square where it's more vulnerable. This is what happens. And this game continues. We're in an end game now. Black is up a pawn and has the more active rook. This outside passed pawn is very dangerous. When will it get rolling? First, white improves the king. The rook now goes on the offensive, targeting the weak pawns. White's defensive. g6. King's ready to roll. The pawn is going to be supported soon. b4. Black captures. And normally you want to meet this capture with a recapture by a pawn. You keep the duo and you look forward to having a passed pawn of your own. This wouldn't be a good attempt by white. If white's recapturing with the pawn, this guy is weak and immediately would get targeted. Rook a2. And how this will basically turn out is that black will win a second pawn, put the king on, put the rook on b1, push this guy as far as you can go, push this guy as far as you could go. And it seems like these 3 alone will be enough to do the job. Maybe black doesn't even need the king in this situation. Not 100% on that, but yeah, clearly black is now up 2 pawns, completely winning, 2 passers. So this is what white needs to avoid. He tries rook takes pawn. The rook is now in a spot to watch over these 2, maybe go on the offensive. From here, rook a2 gives this rook a responsibility. From here, it's king to e4. this king is looking to track down the queenside pawns. During the live stream, I thought after rook to c4, this would have been a funny variation with c5, and let's say if the king makes a move, I believe there's a move like f5, and you see what just happened with that last move? This rook is dead. Can't go anywhere. Everything's covered. And now this pawn is ready to score a touchdown. This rook can capture the pawn. If it tries to break down the c5 point, this guy in the end is going to be way too fast. Anyhow, a rook c4 move, this guy ends up getting stuck. King e4 is tried, and now the h-pawn runs. Rook c2. Keep some pressure on the c-pawn. This is the more useful pawn to capture. If this one is taken, then this one is ready to be captured. Also, if the rook is able to get here, it'd be supporting this base point, so it's important it's defended. Continues to run. Let's play out these moves right here. White now has to go on the defensive, but black has worked it out where after he captures with check and king takes pawn, we have the deflection. Rook takes b3, pulling the rook away so that we can now promote, and we arrive at this imbalanced endgame, queen versus rook and pawn. Rook and passed pawn, so you don't want this guy to get too far advanced. Let's see what the method is to try and win this. First, centralize the queen. You can't move the pawn because we have queen e6. This rook, whenever it's unprotected, it's going to be vulnerable. There's going to be checks always in a position like this, so there's no hiding with the king. Keep the rook on a secure square if you can. In this game, it's king a7, so at least if there is a check, the rook has the opportunity to block on these squares. But the king is also in front of the pawn, so if eventually, eventually the king will have to move in order for the pawn to successfully get to the a8 square. From here, queen e7, king a8. The number one priority is track down this pawn. You could give a check in this position and try and get the pawn next. This is one way to do it. But this would be a good way for black to lose because of rook to b8. So, first things first, some security for the king. Now at least there's no rook move with check. Sidestepped that. And from here we have rook b6. If white tries a6 here, queen e6 is excellent. Pressure here, pressure there, some pressure here. And what does white do? How do you defend this guy and this guy? Rook here, you're going to end up losing the rook. A check and another check. All it ever takes is just a couple moves for a successful fork to land. So, what is tried? Rook b6. Rook, after queen c5 though, move 49, this game goes no further. Nepomniachtchi resigns. Move 49. The last move of this match, Carlsen takes it, winning the World Chess Championship for a 5th time. He has now successfully defended his title 4 times against Anand, Karyakin, Caruana, and now Nepomniachtchi. What is the move here for white? There isn't a good move. Pressure on the rook and pawn, the only way to defend it is this. Now this pawn isn't even in a spot to advance, and black can take some time out to pick off the e-pawn and the f-pawn next. What do you do about that? If you try and get out of the pawn's way, this rook can return to c5, and we have a similar story. The rook would have to go back to a6, and now we can have a couple checks, and you could see that white is getting nowhere. Meanwhile, this queen wiped out those 2 pawns, and these guys are ready to run. No hope for Team Black. In the end, Queen C5. Final move of this 2021 FIDE World Chess Championship match. So let's have a look at, as usual, the tail of the tape on this one. There we go. And we can see that it was even Steven until this big blunder with G3. Yeah, and there was no recovering from that point on. At the end of the day, Nepomniachtchi, one big blunder with G3, a few inaccuracies for Carlsen, 31 and 21 for the average centi-pawn loss. So this was a fun match to cover both on Twitch, Twitch live stream, and here on YouTube. I appreciate all your support, those of you that have been maybe tuned in on the stream and on YouTube, or one of the two. I look forward to doing this whenever that next World Chess Championship comes around, and I'm glad my voice held up for this championship, unlike past ones. So a great match victory for Carlsen, really impressive. 4 wins, 2 with white, 2 with black, and a very, very convincing final match score, 7.5, 3.5. So congrats to Carlsen, and really a great fight by Nepomniachtchi. Those first 5-6 games, I mean, we really got some historic games in there. Super long game, 136 move game. Crazy. Anyhow, as usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this video in the comments section below. I hope you enjoyed this video, this match as a whole, and I'll catch you in the next video. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.